that they owe, that I will owe as your next president, will be to the citizens of this nation, not any other one. And that's why, as your next president, we will use our own military to secure not some other random country halfway around the world that doesn't matter the United States' interest today. We'll use our own money to secure our own borders right here at home in the United States, our southern border and our northern border too. That's what it means to stand for the rule of law in this country. On day one, I will end birthright citizenship for the kids of illegals in this country. It does not apply to them. On day one, we will begin the process of deporting anybody who is in this country illegally. Every last one of them will be returned to their country of origin. That is not controversial. That is what it means to stand for the rule of law. Any federal aid, we're not going to provide federal funding to sanctuary cities that are breaking the rule of law today. We're going to end federal aid to Central America and Mexico until each of those countries has done their part as well to fight this border crisis. Because 80% of the people coming to this country aren't coming from Mexico. They're coming from south of Mexico all the way across. So we can have that border crisis behind us by March of 2025. By the end of 2025, mass deportations are well underway and mostly behind us on the plan I've laid out. But it takes a president with a spine to do it. It's not going to come from incremental reform. And so if you all want a president, like many Republicans in our party, who might give you incremental reform, change the tax rate one direction or another, and do some window dressing and call it a day, compromise, show up at the 50-yard line, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya and pretend to be united, I'm not your guy. There are others who can offer that. I'm not that guy. But if you want to revive the 1776 ideals that this nation was founded on, then nobody's going to shut down that deep state. Nobody's going to actually speak truth to power in the way that I will for you. And if you want somebody who's actually going to get there and actually gut that deep state, actually speak truth to power, then vote for the candidate who's able to speak the truth to you. And there's a reason why I'm the only candidate in this race who can justice. The only candidate who can tell you that I am against the use of eminent domain for that CO2 pipeline making its way across half the state. That is unconstitutional. That it's based on a climate change agenda that, I will say it, absolutely is a hoax because it has nothing to do with the climate. The only candidate who can tell you that Ronna McDaniel needs to step aside after 5 failed years of leadership in our own Republican Party, because we need accountability in our party before we can bring it to the government. The only candidate who will tell you that I will pardon every peaceful January 6th protester on my first day in office, because it's the right thing to do for this country. And I want you to ask yourself, why am I the only candidate who's able to tell you these things? It's because our politics has become corrupt. Every politician anymore is just dancing to the tune of their biggest donor. And in my case, that biggest donor is me. I don't report to them, I report to you. I would rather speak the truth and lose this election than to win by playing some fake game of political snakes and ladders. And our entire bet in this campaign is that that will be the winning strategy. That you all, the people, will decide that you want a leader who actually speaks the truth to you again. I'm not somebody's circus monkey. I refuse to be a pawn on a chessboard. And I think that's what our politics has become. You get to be an outsider once, and I'm the outsider in this race this time around. And so that's why tonight I am asking you for your vote to revive our nation and answer who we are as Americans. And I say this as somebody who's a little different in a lot of ways. I'm not a politician. I'm a businessman. I'm 38 years old. I am the youngest person ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. And I believe it is going to take somebody now more than ever with fresh legs from the outside to reach and lead the new generation of Americans, to revive that missing national pride in this country, where we have been taught to celebrate our diversity and our differences so much that we forgot all of the ways that we are really the same as Americans, bound by that common set of ideals that set this country into motion. E pluribus unum was our creed. It means from many, one. That's what we've lost in this country. We've been taught to celebrate the differences while forgetting the ways that we are the same. That's what we're going to revive, and the way we're going to do it is by all of us. Not just me, not just Apurva, not just Steve King and Steve Holt. All of us. Starting to speak the truth in the open again. Say in public what you will say in private at the dinner table. Say it with a spine. Say it with conviction. Say it with respect. But part of respect is that you respect your neighbor enough to tell him what you actually think. God is real. There are two genders. Fossil fuels are a requirement for human prosperity. Reverse racism is racism. An open border is not a border. Parents determine the education of their children. The nuclear family isn't a bad word. It's the greatest form of governance known to mankind. Capitalism is still the best system we have to lift us up from poverty. Not crony capitalism, but the real thing. There are 3 branches of government in the United States, not 4. And the U.S. Constitution is the strongest and greatest guarantor of freedom in human history. That is the truth. We fight for the truth. We stand up for the truth. That is what won us the American Revolution. That is what reunited us after the Civil War. That is what won us 2 world wars and the Cold War. That is what still gives hope to the free world. And if we can revive that dream over group identity and victimhood and grievance, then nobody in the world, not a nation, not a corporation, not a virus, not China, is going to defeat us. That is what American exceptionalism is all about. And that is what we will revive to save this great country. Thank you for coming out today, guys. God bless you and your families. And may God bless our United States of America. And may we have the right result for our country tonight. I'm asking for your vote at the Iowa caucus. Thank you all for coming out. And let me open this up and have an open conversation. Thank you guys for coming. Give me the hard ones before we got tonight. Thank you.
So, precinct camp for you in Madison County tonight. Looking forward to that.
Thank you, my man. I appreciate everything you're doing.
The people I've talked to ask about, are you an isolationist? You know, a question that comes up often. Then, a lot of conservative Christians in the state of Iowa want to hear a lot about support for Israel. How do you address that?
Sure. And I'll use that as an opportunity. And you talk about conservative Christians, also talk about my faith. It's a lot there. Am I an isolationist? No. To the contrary, I am the only candidate, I was at least the first candidate, others have since followed, to say that in a case like Taiwan, for the foreseeable future, we actually have to abandon strategic ambiguity, which is the current posture of the U.S., to say we won't say what we're going to do. Even the Republican Party's position is that. I think that's unacceptable. I have said that we will defend Taiwan for the foreseeable future because that's what's necessary for defense of our own national interest. China cannot squat on the semiconductor supply chain that comes from Taiwan. And so in many ways, I am upgrading from our current status quo commitments. But what's different about me is I will look at every conflict through one prism, which is what advances American interests. As a father of 2 sons, my obligation is to my family. And I will not be shaken in that. As your next president, my sole obligation is to you, the citizens of this country, not any other one. As it relates to Israel, I think my position is the strongest and most pro-Israel position of anybody else in this race, even though it doesn't follow the traditional talking point script handed through the GOP. And I'll tell you why. Many of the strongest pro-Israel voices in Israel are now saying the same thing that I've been saying, and I'm still saying now, which is that what Israel really needs is our diplomatic support, a diplomatic Iron Dome, to be able to get their job done. And they can get their job done. They're not constrained militarily right now. They're constrained diplomatically with the UN and the EU, and frankly, even the US now, tying their hands. And here's the issue, is if we're just signing some sort of paltry, 16 billion here, 14 billion there, war-specific aid, that requires us, because we're then responsible for what happens, to then second-guess decisions they're making, which then tie their hands. They don't need a backseat driver. They don't need an armchair quarterback. What they need is the diplomatic cover so that the UN or anybody else doesn't wrongfully come in and call with their self-defense genocide which is what you're actually starting to see happen today. And so I said this initially, that this was better for Israel and better for the United States if we focus on giving them the diplomatic support they need to defend themselves, as they have the right to do, because what Hamas did was wrong, it was immoral, it was subhuman, it was medieval. And Israel has an absolute right to defend itself in the same way that we do if that ever happened, God forbid, in this country. But we have to support their right to do it. And that's the strongest form of support we can provide, rather than some half-hearted, half in, half out, but then tie their hands. When in fact, they can absolutely get that job done. So my phone call with Bibi is, you know what? You smoke the terrorists on your southern border, and we're going to smoke the terrorists on our southern border. And we support each other's right to do it without the UN or anybody else getting in our way. And so that's how I'm going to leave. You've got to be strong enough to protect your kindness. But don't just virtue signal and, you know, pass some sort of window dressing bill and say, oh, we did it. No, got to get to the root cause. And we're a better ally for our allies when we also are looking after our interests here at home. Those two things go together. What hope does the rest of the world have if the shining city on a hill no longer still shines? And so I'll ask your friends, I don't blame them, because I know what the news media, I mean, one thing I've learned from this is the news media is the distortion in American politics. They're force-feeding even one narrative of this GOP primary that they've adopted. Well, you know what? They don't get to decide. You do. We do. That's what the Iowa Caucus is about. It's about this. Between us here, there's no social media algorithms in the air. There's no TV screens between us, except maybe for those in the back. You guys able to hear us back there? We're going pretty deep. Okay, I'll talk. If you people come on in, we got people going in the back, and so if they can pack it in, that'd be great. But what I will tell you is this: I want to also address the question about, embedded in there maybe, about faith, which is, my faith is what leads me to this journey. Actually, I'm Hindu, a little different than the traditional faith background of people who run for U.S. president. But I was raised and abide and live by the same Judeo-Christian values that this nation was founded on. I believe God puts each of us here for a purpose. There's one true God, and He gives each of us our own unique gifts. And it is our duty, our moral duty, to use those God-given gifts to do what is right in the short time that we are given. Now, I went to St. Xavier High School. I read the 10 Commandments for the first time. My parents, the value set they raised us in. Honor your parents. Family's the foundation. Adultery's wrong. The good things in life involve a sacrifice. It's not just about this life. It's about the eternal life. Those are the values I was raised in. When I read the 10 Commandments at St. Xavier High School in 9th grade, it didn't feel like I was reading them for the first time. There's one true God. Don't take His name in vain. Observe the Sabbath. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't covet, don't kill. That's where my pro-life views come from. Didn't feel like these were unfamiliar values to me, but they're taught to feel unfamiliar in today's culture. Your DEI training session at a local company. You got a local movie theater, what they're teaching your kids in school. But they're not foreign values to most of us. And so, yes, I think we need a president who is able to stand for those shared values that this country was founded on, to be able to spread them, not just to the prior generation, but to the next generation, to people of multiple different faiths. We live in a religiously pluralistic country, and we want people of all faiths to still stand for our shared American values, and above all, to swear an oath to the Constitution and to keep it, including freedom of speech, including, above all, freedom to worship as you wish, without the government getting in your way, standing up against that assault on religious liberty that we've seen in this country. So will I swear an oath to that Constitution and keep it? Will I stand for those shared national values I believe better than anybody else in this race or otherwise? You're darn right I will. And that's my responsibility as your next president. And the heart of my faith, one of the core teachings is we don't choose who God works through. That's God's choice. We get to the book of Isaiah, a little further along in that semester at St. Xavier High School. That's the one where God chose Cyrus all the way in Persia to lead the Jews back to the promised land. And yes, I believe God has put us here for a purpose. Apurva and I believe that about our family. That's what leads us to run. To bring this back to policy, I think right now, it's going to take a president who has two things. One is you need an outsider, somebody with sharp elbows, willing to break glass. to do the right thing when necessary, even if it flouts the norms of Washington, D.C. Trump brought some of that. I bring that on steroids, okay? But it's also going to take an outsider who knows and deeply understands the law and the Constitution in this country. And those two things don't usually go together. You'll have the legal academic over here, you'll have the business guy over here. But I believe God gives each of us, every one of us has our own unique God-given gifts. And it is our job, and right now more than ever, our duty to this country to use those gifts to do what is right. And that's why I'm running for president. It's out of our duty to this country. And I believe if you all do your part tonight, and that's what I'm asking you for, Apurva and I will do ours. We will stop at nothing to make sure our country's best days, not in some fake politician way, but in a true way, make sure that our best days are actually still ahead of us. And that's why I'm asking for your votes tonight. Thank you. I appreciate that. We'll take a couple more. Two more. Thanks. We'll go there and then we'll come here. Oh my goodness. We'll go as quickly as I can, then we'll give you the final word.
So you comment on the left unleashing of lawfare.
Okay. Lawfare against conservatives. Number one answer, you cannot reform it. You have to shut it down. And I'm the only candidate. I'm not going to promise you to build you some new building for the FBI. I'm not going to promise you to sort of say that I'm going to put a new figurehead on top, fire Christopher Wray. Those are illusions. Illusions that dupe us into believing that we did something without actually doing the real thing. The right answer, the failed Bureau of Investigation, is to shut it down. You cannot defeat the bureaucracy. You have to end it. Now, I'll tell you, this is a practical plan. A lot of Republicans may even say, is that too extreme? No, what's extreme is the status quo, weaponizing the law against people, parents at school board meetings being termed domestic terrorists, Catholics or other Christians being subject to a different standard of scrutiny. That's not America. And so here's how we're going to do this is, and this just gives you, we could do this all day, but I'll use this one example just to give you a sense for how real this is. We're ready to go. All we need to do is get into the White House and get started. There's 35,000 employees at the FBI. 20,000 of them are back office bureaucrats at the J. Edgar Hoover building, for God's sakes, in Washington, D.C. We're going to send them packing, find honest work. 15,000 of them are cops, investigative agents, many of whom are good people who we need. We will move them to the U.S. Marshals or to the DEA, both of which have been far more effective at fighting child sex trafficking rings or the fentanyl epidemic. We will move them to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network at the U.S. Treasury to go after the future SBFs and the financial fraudsters of the world. So we will at once improve effectiveness while ending the weaponization of justice. And you know what? I'll tell the left, 100 years ago in this country, we did have two standards of the rule of law based on your skin color. And it was wrong then, as it is wrong now that we have two standards of justice based on your political beliefs. And so if there's somebody who actually understands this deeply enough, not just to placate you, while building new buildings for the FBI or offering window dressing cosmetic changes and saying we did something, no. Sometimes the truth hurts. But if you actually want to drive the change, we have to get in there and actually be willing to do the hard thing, to actually shut down the bureaucracy, and that's what would actually make our founding fathers proud. They would not be walking around J. Edgar Hoover's building and say they're proud of us. They would say they are appalled, they're aghast. And if I do one thing as your next president, by the time I leave office in January 2033, after 2 terms, if you all put us there, our founding fathers will once again rest in peace, that the country they set into motion is the one that we honor in the way we live today. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Right there.
Sir,
And we'll come to you, sir, right after that.
you said that you stand for freedom. Wouldn't you say that your desire to raise the voting age to 25 takes away freedom from young people like myself?
It's a great question, sir. So, and I appreciate this because one thing you got to know about me is if you care about somebody, you tell them the truth. If you care about yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. I don't tell people what they want to hear at times. The truth hurts. I'll give you one more of that right after I answer this question, even within this race as it relates to tomorrow. But I'll answer this one first. It was controversial when I first said it. I said it here in Iowa, not far from where we are, in a Dallas County rally about 7, 8 months ago. I believe that every high school senior who graduates from high school should have to pass the same civics test that every immigrant has to pass in order to become a voting citizen of this country. That you got to have skin in the game. to play in that game. And I want 100% of high school seniors to be able to do that. And even for those that test isn't enough, military service or first responder service automatically checks the box. But at minimum, you got to have some skin in the game to play in the game. I want a tiny percentage of 18-year-olds actually participating in the electoral process today. I want it to be 100% if we can get there. And I think this is actually going to get us there. And so later in this race, a number of months later, there was a lot of controversy, mostly from the left, saying, well, is this too extreme? What is this guy thinking? Is he a nationalist? I don't think that even has to be such a bad word, necessarily. Our nation's founded on ideals. And so, forget the name calling. It's about civic duty, actually. And so anyway, a 10-year-old girl, actually, in Iowa named Lena, she read about this in the papers. She came to one of my events later on, enthusiastically. She had a packet of 100-question test and a handwritten note to me. 60% is a passing score on the civics test. Most adults fail it today. Questions like, how many branches of government are there? What branch of government does the U.S. president lead? So we require immigrants to know before they vote. They have to score 60%. Most adults fail it. She's 10 years old. She came to me. She made it a point. She braved through the line. We told no more questions, and she's coming right to the front to hand it to me anyway. And she said, I want you to know something. I took the civics test. I'm 10 years old. I scored 100 out of 100 on it. And if I can do this, I want you to know that every kid in this country should be able to do the same thing. And so that's what we want to revive, is that civic spirit that we're missing. I use that as an opportunity to just say one thing that relates to tonight is, as I said, sometimes the truth hurts. You have a choice to make tonight. I think there's two America First candidates in this race. That's Donald Trump and myself. I've defended the man against these unjust persecutions at every step. Last week, I personally filed an amicus brief with the U.S. Supreme Court, laying out what I view as the best legal arguments to keep him out of being eliminated from the ballot. Because frankly, I wasn't sure that his team was going to make those arguments, and they deserve to make for the people of this country. I've stood up against this at every step, but at a certain point for this country, we have to open our eyes, people. They're not going to let this man get anywhere near the White House again. And it's disgusting, but these people now will stop at nothing. And I mean nothing. To keep this man away from the levers of power. But our America First movement cannot end with Trump. Because it didn't start with Trump. It didn't start in 2016. It started in 1776. And we owe it to our founding fathers. And we owe it to the first America First conservative. That was George Washington. We owe it to our history. We owe it to this country to make sure we have another 250 years. And then some still left. They are selling us the rope today that they will use to hang us tomorrow. They want to narrow this to a two-horse race between Trump and a puppet who they can control. Eliminate Trump one way or another and trot in their puppet. We cannot afford to fall for that trap. And so I'm asking you to do the right thing for our country. Those of you in this room, we have many supporters here. Thank you for being precinct captains, volunteers, vocal supporters of this campaign and this movement from a time where even 9 months ago, people had no idea who I was. Here we are on the eve of what I believe is going to be win the Iowa caucus. Thank you for everything you have done to get us to this point, starting in this room nearly a year ago. And I'm asking you to help us in this final 12-hour sprint to tonight, less than 12 hours to tonight, to open the eyes of the other people, good America First patriots, who need to see that truth. We love the man because he got this fight started. But now it is our job to finish it. It is our duty to this country to finish it, to take America First to the next level, to actually make sure that we make our founding fathers proud and say that we're not this nation in decline, but we're just still getting warmed up, that we are still only a little young in our journey. It's our duty to this country to make it so. And if I win the Iowa caucus tonight, I'm your next president. And if I'm your next president, our best days may still yet be ahead of us, because we will revive those founding ideals that, yes, I want every high school senior in this country to know about and to be proud of, because that's how we get this nation back. Thank you, young man. I appreciate it. We'll give you the final word, sir.
First, let me congratulate you on making your millions before you got into office.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We'll try to keep it that way.
So as an owner of a fee-based wealth management firm, what are you going to do to stop the insider trading that happens with
Great.
elected officials? And as a former paratrooper, who's on your short list for Secretary of Defense, and have you ever spoke with Eric Prince?
Yeah. So let me address the first point first. It is so important. This is bipartisan. I don't think that congressmen or senators or bureaucrats should be trading individual stocks. How does that advance the interests of the American public? Put a ban to it. I think we need three term limits for Congress, 2-term limits for the U.S. Senate, and 8-year term limits for every federal bureaucrat, because that's how you keep a fresh lifeblood in Washington, D.C. I don't think that you should be allowed to lobby the government for at least 10 years, until after you've left that same government. Again, somebody explain to me why this is in the interest of the American people. I don't think you should join the board of a company after you have done special favors for that company as a regulator or a governor or a bureaucrat. But the reason they don't do it is the people vote for their own self-interest. And so I'm going to tell you how I'm going to bring some of those things to bear. The 8-year term limits for the bureaucrats, I'll do that as the president. I'm the president of the United States. I'm the leader of the executive branch. You're a business leader, so am I. If somebody works for you and you can't fire them, that means they don't work for you. It means you work for them because you're responsible for what they do without any authority to change it. And I refuse to be that hollowed out husk of a puppet like the one we have in the White House right now. I don't sit here bashing Biden because what's the point? I mean, he's not really in any sense of the word the president. He's a puppet for the managerial class that sits underneath him. We have to see the truth. And I think that you need a president with the spine that leads the executive branch. That's term limit and corruption, anti-corruption, number one. Ending insider trading, ending individual stock trading, 8-year term limits for the bureaucracy. I'm getting that done as an HR policy in the federal government, and I get to do that without asking Congress for permission. Now let's move to Congress. Now we got a bit of a dilemma here. The very people that you need to vote for term limits, the very people you need to vote for bans on their own insider trading, the very people you need to vote for bans on lobbying after they leave the government are the people who would be disadvantaged by it. And you need about 75% of them for certain things like term limits. I'm a businessman. I believe working within the incentives that people already have. I don't always love those incentives, but I'm going to be the first person to get this done. And it's a shock to me I'm the first person to propose it. And here's how I'm certain we're going to get it done. I know these people. I know how they operate. We will tell them, okay, here's the deal. Here's the bill. And if you're not voting for it, fine. Here's the final deal we'll make. We will grandfather you in. Right? We'll cut you in. That's the way people have always operated. That's the very problem we're supposed to solve. And the irony is to get to the solution, you actually still have to cut them in on it. And so you tell them that we will grandfather you in, but whoever comes after you won't have their hands tied in the same way. And it turns out these are wildly popular policies. It will pass with sails through that Congress. And I think that's what it's going to take to get this job done. One legislative accomplishment I will promise you as your next president. I don't usually make legislative promises, but the promises I make are through the executive branch that I can keep. Shutting down the bureaucracy, firing 75% of bureaucrats. As your next president, as commander-in-chief, moving our troops to the southern border, ending birthright citizenship for the kids of illegal migrants, 8-year term limits for the bureaucracy. All of that I'm getting done without asking Congress for permission or for forgiveness. I don't make many promises that are dependent on Congress, but there's one I am confident we will deliver to you, and it may be the most important one of all. And I'll deliver it before the first midterm election after I take over. It is also to secure our elections in this country. We will pass this through and make this the law of the land with single-day voting on Election Day as a national holiday with paper ballots, government-issued voter ID to match the voter file, and yes, English as the sole language that appears on a ballot. That will unite this country, will secure our elections, and then you bring and the rest of that rot along with it. We're well on our way to reviving this country once again. And so I'm asking you all tonight, on a cold day, to do your part. Apurva and I, we will stop at nothing. We've done 390 of these events, over 390. I was told today it's apparently more than any other candidate in history. It's more than all of the other candidates in this race combined. It has been the most humbling experience of my lifetime. And I understand why Iowa goes first, because this is a job interview. We got to see it that way. Sometimes presidential candidates forget that when you're talking to the media all the time. Go to 100 pizza ranches and they'll put you in your place, actually. Been to more of those than I probably would have been great for my health. We started with the deep dish, we went to the thin crust. Now I'm at the salad bar. So by the time we leave Iowa. But it's been the most humbling but fulfilling and memorable experience of our lives. Even tonight, late tonight, when we begin to make our way to New Hampshire, however late in the night that is, we're going to miss this place. We're going to miss all of you. We're going to miss this year. We're not going anywhere. We'll be back for the general election. I'll tell you that. So that's ahead. But this process has been something special for us. And now I understand why Iowa goes first. I get it. I've seen how distorted the media and the super PAC industrial complex is. And this is our last best chance to defeat it. Every one of your voices and votes tonight, and the people who you called to come out with you, which I'm asking you to do, by the way, it's like the equivalent of 1 million people showing up and the impact that it has on selecting the next president. If you asked me a year and a half ago, back when I was a businessman, do you think it matters that Iowa goes first? I would have told you, I don't know if it matters one way or another. With the ardence of the converted, I can tell you that there's a reason why you all go first. We're going to keep it intact. This is how our elections need to be decided. And the final step is tonight. We will stop at nothing for this country. The way we've run this campaign, from the snow days of the last week all the way through the beginning of early part of last year, that's how we're going to lead this country. We're going to do our part, but it's not going to be one president coming from on high from the White House to save us. It doesn't work that way, and I will never promise that to you. That's a false promise. If we're going to be saved in this country, it is going to be because we save ourselves. Every one of us playing our role. Every pastor, every parent, every teacher, every coach, every state legislator, people like Steve Holt to Steve King, to many of you in this room, every mayor, every entrepreneur and business owner, every one of us stepping up to play our part in this country. But what I will promise you is that I will play mine as your next, I will play my role as your next president to actually shut down that bureaucracy and to actually revive our national identity. And that's why I'm asking you for your vote tonight. To do the right thing, not for me or anybody else, do the right thing for this country. And if you all do your part, Apurva and I, we will do ours to make sure we are no longer this nation in decline. We don't have to be at the end of the ancient Roman Empire. What George Washington would say if he were right here with us right now is that, you know what, as a nation, we are still a little young, actually. Going through our own adolescence, figuring out who we're going to be when we grow up. And when you view it that way, it makes sense again, actually. You go through your adolescence, you go through that identity crisis. You lose your way a little bit. You do some stupid things. But we are stronger for it when we get to our adulthood on the other side. So no, I don't think we have to be this nation in decline. I think we still can be a nation in our ascent. Maybe even the early stages of our ascent. Maybe we're not even at base camp. On our way still to that shining city on a hill. That country where we will look our kids in the eye and mean it when we tell them that you get ahead in the United States of America with your own hard work, your own commitment, your own dedication. And that you know what? You are free to speak your mind at every step of the way. That is the American dream. That is what we are running to. And with your help tonight, that is what we will revive to save this great country. Thank you for coming today, guys. God bless you and your families. And may God bless our United States of America. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.